Hello, this video is to explain what the source code is doing and how it's working. Please note that the steps from 1 to 6 have been done. They were tested by you and you stated that there were no bugs. So now I'm going to explain how the code is actually working. And this is important. I suggest you take a very good look at this so that nothing is left ambiguous. There are two main screens. One is called UI, the other is called UI Booster. Over here we have got scripts. One is a clock object, the other is a UI screen, and we also have a state machine which is part of Unity Bolt. We'll first take a look at UI screen. We'll open this in Visual Studio Code, and this will actually tell you about what I'm doing and how I'm doing this. So generally speaking, everything is being handled by player prefs, and some of the things are being handled by the state machine that we created inside of the Unity Bolt plugin. If you take a look at this, these integers, these are all integers that control the value of the clicks, the booster, as well as some of the multiplier functions. Over here we've got an instance so that we can reference this script elsewhere in the project. We have got variables for score, level, slider value, booster value, vault cap, vault cost. All of the functions, all of the integers that required storing are actually here. So using these, we usually are in this code changing the value of the player prefs, which have to remain consistent even after the game is closed. Over here we've got strings. These strings are used mainly to hold data inside player prefs, mainly. Some of these strings are not used, but you can see that this particular string is not used. It's called player autoclick cost key. It's not used within the script, but it's used elsewhere. It's used in Bolt. Over here we have got some references for the UI and the texts in UI. In the awake function we are basically just setting the instance, and we are also setting the player score key over here. Even if you comment this line out, it's not really going to matter much, I believe. Over here we are handling the initial values of the player prefs if the user does not have the keys. This is the onEnable function. The onEnable statements inside the onEnable function are also in the start function. We are setting the initial value of the slider here, and we are also setting the clicker text and the value button state, which is for setting the vault button enable or disable. This is required if, for example, you start the game, you will not have the vault at start. So this is the function that's controlling that. We also don't have autoclick enabled at start, so we are going to say player autoclick is adding to false. When this turns true, the autoclick feature is actually deactivated, so the stuff inside the vault is added to the player's money. So that is what this statement is for. All of these keys, all of these statements above, these are just to handle the keys at the start of the project. This is really, I strongly suggest that this part of the code should not be changed. In the update function we have a few functions that are required for various functionalities. One of those is to set the player money text, set vault button text. We also have a option to actually start the auto clock timer, and we also have a function which checks whether or not we have the player autoclick activate key and whether or not player autoclick is adding is actually false or true. This only runs, add from autoclick only runs when we actually have the function, when we have the functionality of the player autoclick adding, and we also have the key called player autoclick activate, and we are also in the false state of player autoclick is adding. Over here we've got the function or the statements to add or to actually set the player money text. Over here we've got a function which will increase the player score. Over here we've got a function which is going to increase the player by player score increase vault click. So whenever we're going to click this button, we're actually going to increase the player score inside the vault. This is not really a button, it's an auto click button. And it also states here function to increase the player score through the auto click vault feature. So that's the explanation. All of these functions have been coded. This function is empty. I never used it, but it's just in case you need to set the max value somewhere. This is being handled in Bolt. So we also have an increase player level function, increase slider value. We also have a set clicker text function. We also have a set vault button state. We have set vault button text, which is for setting the text that appears on the vault button. Then we also have player money increase. We also have add from autoclick, which is basically the function that actually adds the vault money to the player's money. So this is for that. Okay, so the last function is for add vault money to player. This is also a function which is basically adding the vault money to the player. And this is a enumerator which is being called over here. This is required for proper functionality in Unity Bolt. Now that we're done with this, we can actually take a look at the state machine. In the state machine, we've got all of the functions being called in the update. This is a very small state machine, and the reason why this is small is because we are really using this for debugging and to figure out if there is any error in the script. Where is it coming, what's happening. Basically it is just an update function here. Sorry, these are clicker functions. These are button clicker functions. These are actually handling the UI. I apologize, this is not the update, this is the button click functions of the game. So over here we are actually handling the clicker button. We are also handling the vault button, and we are also handling the booster button. So this is why we have them here. This booster button click is basically just deactivating and activating the UI booster game object. When we click on the UI booster game object, over here we've got a fairly large flow machine that is actually handling all of the functions of the UI booster, which is basically the return button so that we can go back to the main screen of the game. We've also got booster button clicked, vault button clicked, auto button clicked, which are basically the kind of buttons that you have on the UI screen. We also have an upgrade text value, which is basically the text value that we upgrade whenever we click the UI, whenever we click the money button, which is the main button in the game. So we need to upgrade the text value once we have the booster. So this statement is primarily handling that. We also have a group which I haven't named, so we'll name it buttons to enable disable at start. So at game object enable. So I've just named that as for better explanation, but this is just handling the buttons that enable disable when we have the screen in front of us for the first time and for every other time. So we have got upgrade button text here, which is basically going to handle the string that's going to appear on the player booster player prefs, and it is also handling the upgrade click text, which is basically the game object that you'll see here. Let me just show it to you. Hang on a minute. Here it is. If I enable UI booster and if I disable the UI, here we have all of the variables that you'll see in the actual flow machine. All of these variables are over here. So whenever you want to check which variable is doing what, these are all of the variables. Another thing that you can do is if you go to edit graph, over here click objects, here are all of the variables. So we are handling the upgrade button text over here, we are handling the player vault handler over here, we are handling the player vault capacity over here, we are handling the player auto click over here, and we are handling the player auto click seconds over here. Like the upgrade for the auto click is basically this particular group. Generally speaking, all of the functions have a switch case which handle the various functions for each and every state of the player prefs, or each and every value of the player prefs. Over here we've got a statement to actually set the player prefs after all of these switch statements have been done. These switch statements are basically going through a value, a particular value, which is passed by the statements above here. So that's what it basically is. So these are basically the purchase functions on top, and then we actually handle the functionality of all the buttons over here. Generally speaking, all of them are switch cases, and the switch cases are basically for the actual handling of the player prefs values. These switch cases are handling that. Then we also have a function for default value, which is basically just adding 15% to the previous player prefs value. Over here we've got the capacity text value, and this is where we're handling that. Then again, we have got another switch case over here for the auto click, and we've also got a switch case over here. These are basically just handling the player prefs. We also have switch cases over here. As you can see, most of them are switch cases. We also have small functions to make sure that the player does not end up buying something if he or she does not have money to buy a particular upgrade. So for example, if you don't have 1,000, you probably will not be able to buy a booster unless you have the money. So that's what this is doing over here for the most part. The most important part of this project is probably the clock, and I'm going to show you the clock right now. This is the clock object. Once we click the clock object, you'll notice that there's no update function, and we don't require that. Since we are actually going to call the update, we are going to call this clock inside various functions. So here it is, and this is a very small script, but this is the most time consuming part of the project, and the functions are actually pretty small. But this is what this is doing. It is basically a clock which actually takes a look at system time and then stores the system time in a player prefs, and it compares the system time to the current time of the application opening and performs functions based on that. So if you have opened this game at a certain time, and then you actually go ahead and you reopen the app, the way the game calculates how much money you have inside your vault is basically by time comparison. So when you close the application, you open it, player prefs value is stored, and the player prefs value is stored in as ticks, and when the ticks are compared, then a result is passed, and that result is basically how much money you have earned. So that's how this particular clock is working. This clock is of course working just for the vault at the moment. So in the future we will add other stuff to this application as well. My recommendation is that the graphics for this game should be made, this is just my suggestion, so that I can use those graphics to complete the rest of the project. If, because like you gave me a message and where the seller was actually saying that he's waiting for the graphics, so well, he can start working on the graphics now. If you have any questions about the source code, please do give me a video so I can explain to you that particular part of the source code, but I still recommend that you take at least 1 or 2 days to go through the source code and understand how everything is working. The visual script will also help you analyze what values are being passed and where they're being passed. That is the most important thing that you should actually take a look at. Thank you.